Did you know there is a piece of American soil so remote in the Pacific that it is actually closer to New Zealand than it is to California? Or that one American island was once the private property of a chewing gum empire and still has a herd of wild bison roaming it to this day? Or that a tiny, barely known atoll in the middle of the Pacific was the site of arguably the most important naval battle in American history? A battle that, had it gone the other way, might have changed the outcome of World War II entirely. America is not just a continental power, it is an island empire. Stretching from the Caribbean to the far edges of the Pacific, the United States controls, owns, or administers islands that span nearly every ocean on the planet. Some of them you learned about in school. Some of them you have probably never heard of. And almost all of them have a story that most Americans have no idea about. In this video, we are counting down the 25 most significant islands in America, ranked by their strategic importance, their cultural weight, and the role they played in shaping the country you live in today. Some of these will surprise you. Some of them will genuinely shock you. And by the end of this video, you are going to see the United States in a completely different way. This is America's 25 most significant islands, and why they matter. Staten Island, New York. We are starting our countdown on an island that most people forget is even an island at all. Staten Island, the forgotten borough, the one New Yorkers joke about, the one that gets left off the tourist maps. But here's the thing, Staten Island is genuinely an island, separated from the rest of New York City by the Kill Van Kull and the Arthur Kill. And it has a story that is far more interesting than its reputation suggests. For most of its history, Staten Island was farmland and oyster beds. The oysters harvested here were once so abundant they fed much of the eastern seaboard. At its peak, New York Harbor, with Staten Island at its heart, was home to the largest oyster fishery in the world. The harbor produced an estimated 700 million pounds of oysters per year. That is not a small footnote. That is an ecological and economic fact that shaped an entire region. Today, Staten Island is best known for its ferry, one of the most iconic free rides in America, offering a view of the Statue of Liberty that millions of tourists take every year without ever setting foot on the island itself. It is a borough of nearly 500,000 people, a place with its own district working-class identity, and an island that, by almost any measure, belongs on this list, simply because of how thoroughly it gets overlooked. Most people today know Hilton Head as a golf resort, a place with manicured courses, oceanfront hotels, and a very particular kind of American leisure. But before any of that existed, Hilton Head Island was the site of something genuinely remarkable in American history, and almost nobody talks about it. In 1861, just months after the Civil War began, Union forces captured Hilton Head and the surrounding sea islands of South Carolina. The plantation owners fled. The enslaved people they left behind did not. And what happened next was extraordinary. The freed black residents of Hilton Head established Mitchellville, one of the very first self-governing communities of freed black Americans in United States history. They elected their own officials, created their own rules, built their own schools. This was 1862. The Emancipation Proclamation had not even been signed yet. Mitchellville was a living proof of concept, evidence that free black communities could govern themselves effectively, at a time when most of white America refused to believe it. That history has largely been swallowed by golf courses and resort development, but it is there, if you look for it. Hilton Head Island, number 24 on our list. Martha's Vineyard is one of those places that means completely different things to different Americans. To some, it is the ultimate symbol of elite New England wealth, the summer destination of presidents, celebrities, and old money families. To others, it is Oak Bluffs and the Inkwell, a tradition of black American summer life that stretches back over 150 years, to a time when the Vineyard was one of the very few places in America where black families could vacation with dignity and without fear. Both of those things are true at the same time, which makes Martha's Vineyard one of the more complex and layered islands in the country. It was also, famously, the location where Steven Spielberg filmed Jaws in 1975, a movie that did something no marketing campaign ever could. It terrified an entire generation out of the ocean and turned a quiet Massachusetts island into a global household name overnight. But perhaps the strangest and most fascinating fact about Martha's Vineyard is this. For most of the 19th century, the island had one of the highest rates of hereditary deafness in the world. The rate was so high that nearly the entire island population, hearing and deaf alike, communicated in a shared sign language. Martha's Vineyard Sign Language predates American Sign Language and directly influenced its development. A small island off Cape Cod quietly helped shape how millions of Americans communicate today. Number 23, Martha's Vineyard. There are no cars on Mackinac Island. That is not a historical quirk or a temporary policy. It is a rule that has been in place since 1898, making it one of the only communities in the United States where the automobile never won. You get around by horse, by bicycle, or on foot, and the result is an island that feels genuinely frozen in time, in the best possible way. Mackinac Island sits at the northern tip of Lake Huron, at the strategic waterway connecting the Great Lakes. For centuries, that location made it one of the most important places in the entire interior of North America. The French built a fort here. The British took it. The Americans took it back. It changed hands multiple times during the War of 1812. The island was a hub of the fur trade that helped finance the early American economy. And the American Fur Company, once one of the most powerful commercial enterprises in the country, operated out of here. Today, Mackinac Island is famous for its fudge, its Victorian architecture, and its Grand Hotel, one of the longest wooden porches in the world. It was the setting for the 1980 film Somewhere in Time. It draws nearly 1 million visitors a year to a place with a permanent population of just a few hundred. It is small, it is quiet, and it is one of the most distinctly American places you will ever visit. Number 22. Most Americans have never heard of Johnston Atoll, and it does not appear on most maps. You cannot visit it. There are no residents, no hotels, no flights in. It is a tiny strip of coral and sand, sitting roughly 860 miles southwest of Honolulu. And for much of the 20th century, it was one of the most classified pieces of American territory on the planet. The United States used Johnston Atoll for nuclear weapons testing. Between 1958 and 1962, several high-altitude nuclear detonations were conducted here, including Operation Starfish Prime in 1962, in which a 1.4 megaton thermonuclear warhead was detonated 250 miles above the surface of the Earth. The resulting electromagnetic pulse knocked out streetlights and set off burglar alarms in Hawaii, nearly 900 miles away. It was one of the most dramatic weapons tests in American history. And it happened on an island most people cannot point to on a map. After the nuclear testing era, Johnston Atoll became a storage and destruction facility for chemical weapons, including nerve agents and mustard gas. The last of those weapons were not fully destroyed until 2000. Today, the atoll is a national wildlife refuge, administered by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The birds have it now. But the history underneath their feet is unlike almost anywhere else on Earth. Johnston Atoll, number 21. Stretching for 70 unbroken miles along the Texas Gulf Coast, Padre Island is the longest barrier island in the United States. It is also one of the least developed stretches of coastline left in the entire country, a fact that is remarkable given how thoroughly America has built over, developed, and commercialized almost every other accessible piece of coastline. The southern tip of the island, South Padre Island, is a well-known spring break destination and resort town. But the vast middle section, the Padre Island National Seashore, is a protected wilderness of wind-sculpted dunes, grasslands, and one of the most important nesting grounds for the Kemp's Ridley sea turtle, the rarest sea turtle in the world. Every summer, rangers and volunteers gather on the beach to protect turtle nests and escort hatchlings to the water. It is one of the quiet conservation success stories of the American coastline. Padre Island was named after Padre José Nicolas Bali, a Spanish priest who received a land grant from the Spanish crown in the early 1800s and established a ranch on the island. Before that, it was home to the Karankawa people for thousands of years. It is a place layered with indigenous history, Spanish colonial history, Texan identity, and ecological significance, all stretched along 70 miles of Gulf Coast barrier sand, number 20 on our list. Here's a fact that surprises a lot of people. The largest island in the contiguous United States is not off the coast of Florida, or California, or Maine. It is in the Pacific Northwest, tucked into Puget Sound, just north of Seattle. Whidbey Island, Washington. 169 square miles of forested bluffs, farmland, and small towns, and home to one of the most operationally active military installations in the country. Naval Air Station Whidbey Island is the Navy's premier tactical electronic attack aircraft base. This is where the EA-18G Growler is stationed, a specialized aircraft designed to suppress and destroy enemy air defense systems, essentially clearing the sky for other aircraft to operate safely. If the United States were to enter a major attack in the Pacific, NAS Whidbey Island would be among the first installations to surge into action. It is not a base most Americans have heard of, but inside the military community, it is considered absolutely critical. Beyond the base, Whidbey Island is a place of genuine natural beauty. Ferry rides across Puget Sound, whale watching, historic Coopville, and one of the oldest towns in Washington state. It is the kind of place where military families and artists and farmers all live in quiet proximity to each other. Strategic, scenic, and significantly underappreciated. Whidbey Island, number 19. There's a small island sitting 30 miles off the coast of Cape Cod. That, for a brief period in the 19th century, was one of the most economically important places in the entire world. Not important for its size. Nantucket is only about 14 miles long. Not important for its population. It never had more than about 10,000 residents at its peak. Important because of what its ships hunted, and what that hunting powered. Nantucket was the whaling capital of the world. At its height in the 1840s, Nantucket's fleet of whaling ships ranged across every ocean on the planet. The Pacific, the Atlantic, the Indian Ocean, the Arctic. They were hunting sperm whales, and the oil rendered from those whales was the primary fuel source for lamps and machinery across the industrializing world. Nantucket whale oil literally lit the streets of Europe and America. The Industrial Revolution was, in part, powered by what those ships brought back to this tiny island. Herman Melville's Moby Dick, arguably the greatest American novel, opens on Nantucket, the real-life sinking of the whale ship Essex by a sperm whale, which inspired Melville, is one of the most extraordinary true stories in American maritime history. The crew survived for 95 days at sea after the attack, a story of endurance that shocked the world. Today, Nantucket is a wealthy summer destination known for gray-shingled cottages and expensive restaurants. But underneath all of that is the story of a tiny island that once helped fuel the modern world. Number 18, Nantucket. Palmyra Atoll is one of the strangest entries on this list. It is a collection of roughly 50 small islets in the central Pacific Ocean, about 1,000 miles south of Hawaii. It has no permanent population, no roads, no infrastructure to speak of, and yet it holds a legal distinction that almost no other piece of American territory shares. Palmyra is an incorporated territory of the United States, meaning it is directly and fully subject to the U.S. Constitution in a way that places like Guam and Puerto Rico technically are not. It is one of the only pieces of American soil outside the 50 states where the full weight of the Constitution formally applies. That distinction sounds abstract, but it has real implications for how American sovereignty works at its outermost edges. During World War II, the U.S. Navy built an airstrip and a small base on Palmyra, using it as a refueling stop and strategic waypoint in the Central Pacific. Today, it is jointly managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Nature Conservancy as one of the most pristine coral reef ecosystems remaining anywhere on the planet. Scientists travel here to study what a healthy ocean actually looks like, because almost nowhere else still has one. Palmyra Atoll, number 17, and one of the most quietly fascinating places the United States controls. On December 8, 1941, the day after Pearl Harbor, Japanese forces attacked Wake Island. What followed was one of the most remarkable defensive stands in American military history. A garrison of roughly 400 Marines and 1,200 civilian contractors, with almost no air support and limited ammunition, held off a Japanese invasion force for 15 days. The defense of Wake Island became an immediate symbol of American resilience in the darkest days of the Pacific War, a story of men who refused to quit even when the odds were impossible. Wake Island is a tiny coral atoll, 3 islets arranged in a rough horseshoe shape, sitting roughly halfway between Hawaii and Guam. Its strategic value has always been its location. In the age of propeller aircraft, it was an essential refueling stop across the Pacific. In the age of jets, it remains a U.S. Air Force installation used for refueling, emergency landings, and as a forward logistics point in a region that the United States considers absolutely vital to its long-term strategic interests. There are no civilians on Wake Island. The roughly 100 people there at any given time are military and contractor personnel. It is a dot on the map that most Americans will never visit and rarely think about. But in 2 separate world conflicts, it is proven that its location alone makes it worth fighting for. Wake Island, number 16. American Samoa is the only piece of United States territory located in the southern hemisphere. It sits about 2,600 miles southwest of Hawaii, deep in the South Pacific, and it is home to roughly 55,000 people who are among the most fiercely patriotic Americans anywhere in the country, despite the fact they cannot vote in federal elections. American Samoa produces more military enlistees per capita than any U.S. state or territory. For generations, Samoan families have sent their sons and daughters into the United States Armed Forces at rates that dwarf every other community in America. It is a tradition rooted in pride, in culture, and in a deep sense of obligation to a country that has not always extended full rights in return. That tension, extraordinary service alongside limited political representation, is one of the defining stories of American Samoa and of the broader question of what it means to be an American territory. Strategically, American Samoa provides the United States with a presence in the South Pacific that no other territory offers. Its deepwater harbor at Pago Pago is one of the finest natural harbors in the entire Pacific Ocean. During World War II, it was a critical staging point. Today, it anchors American influence in a part of the world that China has been actively courting for years. Small in size, enormous in significance, American Samoa, number 15. Between 1892 and 1954, more than 12 million immigrants passed through a single building on a small island in New York Harbor. They came from Italy and Poland, from Russia and Ireland, from Hungary and Greece and a dozen other countries. They came with almost nothing, and they walked off Ellis Island into a country that would, in the generations that followed, be fundamentally shaped by their arrival. Ellis Island was the main federal immigration station of the United States for over 6 decades. At its peak, inspectors were processing thousands of people per day, checking names, checking health, deciding in a matter of minutes who would be admitted and who would be turned away. For most immigrants, the inspection lasted only a few hours, but those hours were the most consequential of their lives. The decision made on Ellis Island determined whether a family built its future in America or was sent back across the ocean. Today, an estimated 40% of Americans can trace at least one ancestor through Ellis Island. That is not a statistic about immigration policy. That is a statistic about the DNA of the American population. No other island on this list shaped who Americans actually are, as people, as families, as a nation, more directly than this one. Ellis Island, number 14. It sits just 1.25 miles off the shore of San Francisco, close enough to see the city lights from your cell window, close enough to hear the sounds of traffic and life on the mainland. And for the men imprisoned there, that proximity was a deliberate psychological torment. You could see freedom, you could just not reach it. That was the point of Alcatraz. The island served as a federal penitentiary from 1934 to 1963, housing some of the most dangerous criminals in America, including Al Capone, George Machine Gun Kelly, and Robert Stroud, the Birdman of Alcatraz. It was considered escape-proof, not because the walls were unbreakable, but because of the cold, fast-moving currents of San Francisco Bay surrounding it. In 29 years of operation, no prisoner was ever confirmed to have successfully escaped. 36 men tried. But the story of Alcatraz does not end with its closure. In 1969, a group of Native American activists occupied the island for 19 months, claiming it under a Sioux treaty and demanding it be converted into a Native American cultural center. The occupation failed to achieve its stated goals, but it became one of the most visible acts of Native American civil rights activism in the 20th century and helped galvanize a broader movement. Alcatraz means many things to many people. That is what makes it one of the most significant islands in America. Number 13. St. Simon's Island is one of the Golden Isles of Georgia, a string of barrier islands along the state's Atlantic coast that most Americans outside the Southeast have never thought much about. But St. Simon's carries a history that reaches back to the earliest days of colonial America and forward to one of the richest surviving African American cultural traditions in the United States. In 1742, the Battle of Bloody Marsh was fought here, a decisive engagement in which a small force of British soldiers and their indigenous allies defeated a vastly larger Spanish invasion force from Florida. The victory secured the colony of Georgia for Britain and effectively halted Spanish expansion into what would become the American South. It was a small battle in a forgotten corner of the continent, but without it, the map of the eastern seaboard might look very different today. St. Simon's is also one of the heartlands of Gullah Geechee culture, the living cultural tradition of the descendants of enslaved West Africans who were brought to the Sea Islands of Georgia and South Carolina. The Gullah Geechee people developed their own language, their own music, their own cuisine, their own spiritual practices, a culture that survived slavery, survived Jim Crow, and survives today in the communities of the Georgia coast. St. Simon's Island, a place where American history runs deeper than most people know. Number 12. If you had to pick a single moment that turned the tide of the entire Pacific War, a moment where the United States went from being on the defensive to seizing the initiative, most historians would point to the waters around a tiny atoll called Midway in June of 1942. The Battle of Midway lasted 4 days. The Japanese Navy arrived with a vastly superior force, 4 fleet carriers, battleships, cruisers, and hundreds of aircraft. The U.S. Navy had 3 carriers, significant intelligence advantages from code breaking, and a willingness to send torpedo bombers into withering defensive fire even when it meant near certain death. In the end, the United States sank all 4 Japanese carriers. Japan lost over 3,000 men and the core of its naval air power in a single engagement. It never fully recovered. The Pacific War would go on for 3 more years, but after Midway, the direction of that war had changed permanently. Today, Midway Atoll is a national wildlife refuge and the nesting ground of the world's largest colony of Laysan albatrosses. The birds have no idea what happened in the waters around them, but the men who fought and died there, on both sides, shaped the world those birds now inhabit. Midway Atoll. Number 11. The Northern Mariana Islands, from a chain of 14 islands in the Western Pacific, about 1,500 miles east of the Philippines. Most of them you have never heard of, but one of them changed the world in a way that almost no other piece of land in human history can claim. Tinian. On August 6, 1945, a B-29 superfortress called the Enola Gay took off from North Field on the island of Tinian and flew to Japan. It dropped a single bomb on the city of Hiroshima. 3 days later, a second B-29 took off from the same runway and dropped a second bomb on Nagasaki. Within weeks, Japan had surrendered. And World War II was over. The atomic age had begun, and it all started on a runway on a small island that most Americans could not find on a map. Today, the Northern Mariana Islands are a U.S. Commonwealth territory with growing strategic importance in the Indo-Pacific. The United States has been significantly expanding its military presence across the island chain in recent years, building new facilities, conducting more exercises, deepening alliances. As part of a broader effort to maintain deterrence against Chinese military expansion in the region, the island that launched the bomb that ended one world war is now once again at the center of a global strategic competition. Northern Mariana Islands, number 10. In 1917, the United States paid Denmark $25 million in gold for a group of islands in the Caribbean. That might sound like an enormous sum, and it was at the time, the largest land purchase in U.S. history by dollar amount per square mile. But the United States was not buying the islands for their beaches. It was buying them to keep Germany from getting them first. World War I was raging in Europe, and American military planners were deeply worried that if Denmark, a neutral but potentially vulnerable nation, were overrun by Germany, the Virgin Islands could fall into German hands and become a submarine base threatening the eastern seaboard of the United States and the approaches to the Panama Canal. The purchase was a preemptive strategic move, one of the clearest examples in American history of geography being treated as a national security asset. Today, the U.S. Virgin Islands are home to about 100,000 American citizens, people who can serve in the military and pay certain federal taxes, but cannot vote for president. St. Croix, St. Thomas, and St. John each have their own distinct character, their own history rooted in sugar, slavery, and Danish colonial rule, and their own complicated relationship with American governance. They are among the most beautiful islands in the Western Hemisphere. They are also a reminder that American foreign policy has always had a geographic dimension that most Americans never think about. The U.S. Virgin Islands, number 9. Oahu is not the biggest island in Hawaii. It is not the most volcanic or the most ecologically dramatic, but it is the one that changed American history, and in some ways changed world history, on a single Sunday morning in December 1941. The attack on Pearl Harbor killed 2,403 Americans, wounded nearly 1,200 more, destroyed or damaged 19 naval vessels and over 300 aircraft, and brought the United States into the Second World War. In terms of sheer historical consequence, few events in American history have had a longer shadow. Pearl Harbor is why American troops went to North Africa, to Sicily, to Normandy, to the Pacific Islands. It is the reason the United States emerged from World War II as the dominant global power. And it all pivoted on a military base on the southern shore of Oahu. But Oahu is more than Pearl Harbor. It is Honolulu, the most isolated major city on Earth, sitting in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, a cosmopolitan metropolis of nearly 400,000 people that somehow functions as the cultural and commercial capital of an entire ocean. It is Waikiki, one of the most recognized stretches of beach anywhere in the world. And it is the headquarters of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, the military command responsible for more than half the surface of the planet. Strategically, culturally, historically, Oahu earns its place near the top of this list, number 8. Guam is the westernmost point of the United States. It is an island of about 210 square miles in the Western Pacific, roughly 3,800 miles from Hawaii and just 1,500 miles from the coast of China. In that distance, that precise geographic position, is the reason the United States has defended this island in 2 world wars and continues to invest billions of dollars in its military infrastructure today. During World War II, Japan captured Guam within days of Pearl Harbor. The island's American and Chamorro defenders were overwhelmed, and the Chamorro people, the indigenous inhabitants of Guam, endured nearly 3 years of brutal Japanese occupation. Liberation came in 1944, after some of the most intense fighting in the Pacific Theater. The people of Guam did not choose to be at the center of that war. Geography chose for them. Today, Guam hosts some of the most strategically critical military installations in the entire Indo-Pacific, including Andersen Air Force Base, Naval Base Guam, and a growing array of missile defense systems. Military planners refer to it as the tip of the spear in any potential Pacific conflict. If tensions with China or North Korea were ever to escalate into open conflict, Guam would be among the very first places in the world to feel it. The 160,000 people who live there, American nationals who cannot vote for president, are fully aware of that fact. Guam, number 7. 22 miles off the coast of Los Angeles sits an island that has been, at various points in American history, a smuggler's haven, a military base, a Hollywood backlot, a chewing gum heir's private kingdom, and home to a herd of bison that has absolutely no business being there, and yet has been there for over 100 years. Catalina Island was purchased in 1919 by William Wrigley Jr., the chewing gum magnate, who transformed it into a resort destination and used it as the spring training home of his baseball team, the Chicago Cubs. Wrigley brought 14 bison to the island in 1924 for a Western film that was never actually completed. The bison stayed. Their descendants, a herd of roughly 150 animals, still roam the island's interior today, a surreal sight on a California island that looks nothing like the Great Plains. During World War II, the U.S. military took control of Catalina and used it as a training facility and surveillance post, watching the Pacific approaches to Los Angeles for Japanese submarines. The entire civilian population was evacuated. After the war, the island was returned and eventually transferred to the Catalina Island Conservancy, which now manages most of its land as a nature preserve. Today, Catalina is one of the most visited islands in the United States, a place where the strangeness of American history is visible in every bison that wanders across a hillside. Number 6. Kodiak Island is the second largest island in the United States, after the Big Island of Hawaii. It sits in the Gulf of Alaska, separated from the Alaska Peninsula by a narrow strait, and it occupies one of the most strategically significant positions on the entire North Pacific Rim. If you were drawing a line of defense between the continental United States and Asia, Kodiak would be one of the anchor points. The island is home to the Coast Guard Sector Anchorage and Coast Guard Air Station Kodiak, the largest Coast Guard installation in the United States. From Kodiak, the Coast Guard conducts search and rescue operations across the most treacherous waters in the world, monitors fishing fleets across the North Pacific, and maintains American presence along an Arctic coastline that is becoming more strategically important with every passing year as sea ice retreats and new shipping routes open up. Kodiak also sits at the edge of a region that the Russian military has historically treated as its own sphere of influence. Russian aircraft and submarines regularly operate in the waters near Alaska, and the U.S. military treats the approaches to Kodiak with the same seriousness it treats approaches to Guam or Hawaii. The island is also home to the Alutiiq people, one of Alaska's indigenous nations, whose culture and history on these islands stretches back thousands of years before any flag was planted here. Kodiak Island, number 5. Puerto Rico is the most populous territory of the United States, home to 3.2 million American citizens, more people than 20 of the 50 states. It has been American territory since 1898, when the United States seized it from Spain at the end of the Spanish-American War. And in the century and more since then, it has existed in a legal and political status that has no real parallel anywhere else in the developed world. Puerto Ricans are American citizens by birth. They serve in the U.S. military and have done so at extraordinarily high rates, with Puerto Rican units fighting with distinction in both world wars, in Korea, in Vietnam, and beyond. They pay certain federal taxes, but they cannot vote for president. They have no voting representation in Congress. Their relationship with the federal government is one of the most debated constitutional questions in American law. And after Hurricane Maria devastated the island in 2017, it became one of the most urgent humanitarian questions as well. Strategically, Puerto Rico is the eastern gateway to the Caribbean, a geographic fact that has made it valuable to every empire that has ever tried to control the Western Hemisphere. El Morro, the massive Spanish fortress at the entrance to San Juan Harbor, was built in the 1500s, specifically because of that geography. 4 centuries later, that same geography is why the U.S. military maintains installations on the island today. Puerto Rico, number 4 on our list, and one of the most complex and important islands the United States has ever called its own. Long Island is the most populous island in the United States and the 4th most populous in the entire Western Hemisphere. Nearly 8 million people live on it. It stretches 118 miles east from the edge of New York City into the Atlantic Ocean. And it is so large and so thoroughly built over that most of the people who live on it never really think of it as an island at all. Long Island shaped the American suburb. After World War II, developer William Levitt built Levittown here, the original mass-produced suburb, a community of thousands of nearly identical homes, built rapidly for returning veterans and their families. Levittown became the template for suburban development across the entire United States. The cul-de-sacs, the car dependency, the separation of residential and commercial life. The physical form of the American suburb was essentially invented on Long Island and then replicated across the country for the next 70 years. But Long Island is also the site of some of the most significant scientific and military infrastructure in American history. Brookhaven National Laboratory, where multiple Nobel Prize-winning discoveries were made, sits on Long Island. The Grumman facility here built the Apollo lunar module, the spacecraft that actually landed on the moon. The radar systems developed on Long Island during World War II helped win the Battle of Britain. And the beaches, the lighthouses, the Gold Coast mansions that inspired F. Scott Fitzgerald to write The Great Gatsby, all of it on one island, just off the edge of the greatest city in the world, Long Island, number 3. There's an argument, not a frivolous one, that the most important island in the history of the world is a 13-mile strip of schist bedrock sitting at the mouth of the Hudson River in New York Harbor. Manhattan Island, home to Wall Street and the United Nations, to Broadway and Central Park, to more Fortune 500 headquarters than any other city on Earth. The financial, cultural, and media capital of the United States, and by most measures, of the world. Manhattan was purchased, famously perhaps apocryphally, from the Lenape people in 1626 for goods valued at 60 guilders. The Dutch colony of New Amsterdam took root here because the geography was perfect. A deep natural harbor, a major river artery leading inland, a defensible island position. The British saw the same thing, took it in 1664, renamed it New York, and built an empire of trade around it. By the 19th century, New York was the largest city in the Western Hemisphere. By the 20th, it was arguably the most powerful city on Earth. Today, more than 1.6 million people live on Manhattan, making it one of the most densely populated places in the United States. Trillions of dollars in financial transactions flow through it every single day. Every American president has had to reckon with it. Every global leader visits it. Virtually every major cultural movement of the last century has either started here or passed through here. Manhattan is not just significant, it is singular. Number 2 on our list. And the only reason it is not number 1 is because of one island that has done something even Manhattan cannot claim. Number 2, Manhattan Island. And so we arrive at number 1, and we are going to the Pacific. Hawaii is the only U.S. state that was once an independent sovereign nation. The Kingdom of Hawaii was recognized by every major world power: Britain, France, Japan, the United States itself. It had a constitution, a legislature, a royal family, a diplomatic corps. It was overthrown in 1893 in a coup supported by American businessmen and U.S. Marines, an act that the United States Congress formally apologized for in 1993, exactly 100 years later. The story of how Hawaii became American is one of the most complicated and contested stories in the entire history of American expansion. And yet, from these same islands, from Pearl Harbor, from the runways of Oahu, from the waters of Midway just to the northwest, America fought and won the most consequential naval war in human history. The Pacific War was decided, in significant part, by what happened in and around the Hawaiian Islands. The world that emerged from that war, the American-led international order, the global institutions, the decades of relative peace among great powers, was shaped by events that took place here, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, on islands that were not yet fully, willingly, or justly American. Hawaii is also one of the most ecologically remarkable places on the planet because of its extraordinary isolation. The nearest continent is over 2,400 miles away. Species evolved here that exist nowhere else on Earth. It is the endangered species capital of the United States and the native Hawaiian people, whose ancestors navigated thousands of miles of open ocean using only stars and waves to settle these islands more than 1,500 years ago, represent one of the great seafaring civilizations in human history, a civilization that was very nearly destroyed by the same forces of American expansion that made these islands strategically indispensable. That contradiction, the beauty and the injustice, the strategic genius and the imperial overreach, the sacrifice and the sovereignty, is what makes the Hawaiian Islands the most significant islands in America. Not because they are the biggest, not because they are the most famous, but because no other islands on this list carry that much history, that much complexity, and that much consequence all at once. The Hawaiian Islands, number 1. And that is America's 25 most significant islands and why they matter. If you made it this far, thank you. This list could have gone on 100 different ways. There are islands we did not include that have just as strong a claim as some of the ones that made it. This is kind of the point. America is bigger, stranger, more complicated, and more geographically remarkable than most people ever get to see. If there is an island you think should have made the list, or one you think should have ranked higher or lower, let us know in the comments. We read them. And if you want more videos like this one, geography, history, the stories hiding behind the places most people walk past without a second thought, subscribe. We put one out every week. Thanks for watching.